everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session on parenting in a digital world. My name is Amy Leiden, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Joel Smith. Joel has an expansive trauma knowledge and a specialty working with people of all ages around trauma issues. Joel provides TFCBT, CPT, Seeking Safety, motivational interviewing, and EMDR treatments for trauma in his role as lead trauma clinician at Jefferson Center for Mental Health. Today, Joel is going to be talking about the apps and texts kids use and how they can be used to help them build each other up or be used to bully and shame. You'll learn about some of the media they're using, how you can monitor their usage, and offer them support. As a reminder, today's presentation, along with all of the presentations from this conference, will be available on demand after the live session for the next 30 days. Before I hand the mic over to Joel, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about the presentation and about the conference in general. First, I would like to thank our sponsors and partners who've helped make this event possible. It really is a community effort to put this together, and I'd like to send a special thank you to Jeffco Public Schools, the Rotary Club of Golden, Delta Dental, Westminster Medical Clinic, Source Communication, and Jeffco PTA for all your support. Next, a few housekeeping items. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speaker, you can feel free to send it through the Q&A tab at the right-hand side of your screen. And I will be collecting these questions, and Joel will be answering them towards the end of the session. If we don't get to your question, or if you'd like to ask additional questions, we encourage you to attend the final Q&A sessions between 8:30 and 9 tonight. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can email us at webmaster@jcmh.org, and someone will be available to assist you. Also, finally, at the end of this presentation, please fill out our session evaluation by clicking on the link that I'll be putting in the chat. Your feedback is important, and it helps us plan for future conferences. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off and welcome Joel. So Joel, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to put our little PowerPoint on our screen for you so that we can follow along. It's super exciting. It looks like it did something. I'm going to open it. We're using a platform that we've never used. Be a little patient. Be a little kind. It says, Amy, it says an error occurred during the file presentation. Should I try it again?
I am not exactly sure what that means. I would go ahead and try it again. If it doesn't work, I'll have you email that to me, and I'll see if I can do it on my end.
Okay. Same deal. What happens if I just share the screen rather than share the file? Does that work?
It should. Go ahead and give it a shot. I'm about as familiar with this platform as you are.
It's not giving me the option to share what I want to share when I share the screen. Although, let me try it. No, it's just not letting me do anything this way. Oh, maybe this. We love you all at home. This is it's really fun. Can everybody see this?
I can see it. So I don't think we can hear other folks, but I am seeing your presentation. And please
Okay.
put in the chat if you are not able to see it.
Okay. So okay. Why don't I just take a second to kind of introduce myself? Amy was great, and let you all know what I do. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been a therapist for about 20 years. I've been specializing in that time in mostly trauma, and I've worked with a little bit of everybody. I used to work in corrections. I've done community mental health for a long time, and I've been doing my own private practice too. And I'll see a little bit of everybody, doesn't matter who you are. I do specialize in trauma and addiction. I've worked for Jefferson Center for about 4 years. I like asparagus. It's my favorite vegetable. It's green, it's yummy, it's delicious. I'm good at baking, but I'm horrible at layups. And when I say I'm horrible, if you really just want to laugh until you die, you should watch me do a layup. It really is kind of that entertaining. And those are a little bit of good things about me. Happy to meet all of you. I want to say just a word about Jefferson Center before we get started. Jefferson Center is a nonprofit community mental health center located in Jefferson County. And we also have offices in Clear Creek and Gilpin counties. We've been open since about 1958. We are a very large agency, and we do a little bit of everything in the world of mental health. So if you are looking for an outpatient mental health counselor for any variety of needs, you're probably going to find something that is up your alley. If you're looking for medication and psychiatry, we do that. If you're looking for wellness classes, we do that. If we're looking for addiction counselors, you'll find those. You'll find school-based counselors, you'll find veteran services, you'll find family therapists, and kind of like I said, you'll find a little bit of everybody who does everything. Sometimes when people ask me about Jefferson Center, they'll say, but it's only a Medicaid service. And we do absolutely offer services that are paid for by Medicaid, but we do take almost all insurances also. Or if you don't have insurance, we often work with you for a payment schedule too. So whatever. We are about 700 employees, and we're one of the largest employers in Jefferson County, to kind of tell you a little bit about us. What Amy said we're going to talk about is pretty much what we're going to talk about, and here's an overview of that. I want to talk about how kids are impacted by interfacing with media so much. And here are some of the things I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on bullying and how that is a topic that has changed and run rampant in our society, and why that is different and such a big deal as opposed to just bullying in person. Why is it a big deal if we can bully on the media also? I want to talk about media and body image, media's impact on suicide and suicidal thoughts. I want to talk about screen time in our kids and how much screen time is appropriate, how people can set some rules and boundaries about that. It's not on here, but I'm going to talk just for a little bit about our kids and schooling online and virtual learning, because I know that is a thing that is happening today. And then I'm going to provide some time for questions and discussion. At the end, I will stop at a couple points throughout this evening and invite some questions if you all have any. If you do have a question while I'm talking for clarification, go ahead and shoot it into the chat. And Amy is wonderfully looking at the chat and can stop me if there's a question that you have. Straight up first, though, I want to talk about bullying and what the heck it is. This definition is from the Colorado Department of Education, or education. It's really great that apparently I can't spell education. But if I catch myself, do I get points for that? Some people are shaking their heads, and that's fine. But here it is: any written or verbal expression or physical or electronic art, act, or gesture or pattern thereof that is intended to coerce, intimidate, or cause any physical, mental, or emotional harm to any student. I like this definition a lot because I feel like it's very complete. We tend to think sometimes of bullying as like a big kid threatening a little kid. Bullying today is a lot more than that. Bullying involves secrets. Bullying involves never letting up because social media can track you anywhere. Bullying involves somebody's gender, somebody's sexual preference, somebody's religion, somebody's economic status, like all of the things we think that make people a little bit different than somebody else. That's what you can be bullied over, and that's what bullies prey upon. How is cyberbullying different? And like I alluded to a second ago, cyberbullying is constant. It's 24/7. It used to be, before all this, you could go to school and be bullied for 8 hours a day at school and come home and breathe. Hopefully, unless you're being bullied at home also, right, by a sibling or a parent. But today, if your kid's on social media, he can be bullied wherever social media can reach him or her. And so it's constant. Cyberbullying is also different because the bully often perceives correctly that there are no consequences. And the bully seems pretty powerful. I'm going to talk about consequences that can and do happen and how you can encourage the active consequences to happen. But very often bullies bully online and don't get caught, which only encourages them to bully, right? Another aspect of cyberbullying that is different is the anonymity factor. The bully can create a profile which does not identify the bully. So, the bully can have a picture of a cartoon character or just a blank image, or even worse, the bully can have a profile picture of the victim's friend, and the friend, the victim can think that the bully is actually the friend for a little bit before they might realize otherwise. Another horrible aspect of cyberbullying is that the messages on social media can stay, and they can stay forever. They can be very difficult to remove or to delete. At times, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. At times, you can talk to the bully through a reconciliation process, or you can talk to the parents of the bully, and the message can be deleted. You can also sometimes, depending on the content of the bullying, have the social media platform delete it. But that's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort. And in the meantime, that message is staying put every day for your kiddo to see. Before I get too far into this, I want to back up a second and talk about, why am I talking about bullying in the first place? What's the big deal? Everybody has been bullied, right? And bullying is normal, and maybe it's even good for kids because it helps them develop character and all of that kind of stuff. So I agree with all of that, actually. And I can hear people at home being like, a therapist thinks that kids should be bullied. And I'm like, maybe I'm not going to go that far, but absolutely adversity helps toughen kids up and helps them create conflict resolving skills. Being bullied helps them later in life not take things so personally when they have conflict with other people in relationships and at work. There are some of the things that come from bullying that are absolutely helpful later in life. So if I may, I do want to separate out normal bullying from excessive bullying, and it is the excessive type that I'm going to talk about tonight. People at home are thinking, everybody gets bullied from time to time, and while that is not enjoyable, I do think it creates an opportunity to learn lessons that are positive and we can absolutely carry forward in life. But I'm going to talk about excessive bullying, and these are some of the things that can be caused by that kind of excessive bullying. One of them is decreased self-esteem. If somebody is bullied day in, day out, there are several bullies involved. Let me take another step back, I guess. What is excessive bullying? It literally doesn't stop, is one of the things that you can say is excessive about it. Very often, somebody can be a bully to you because they're having a bad day, right? But the other, rest of the semester, the kid is actually okay with you or doesn't even notice you. That's, you get bullied once and it happens, but excessive bullying doesn't stop. Excessive bullying also happens when it's not just one bully, but there are several bullies involved. It's like this, avalanche effect where, somebody does something for a laugh or because it makes them feel more powerful or whatever, and everybody else jumps on board. Before you know it, this kid is getting bullied by not just one kid, but by a group or a community of kids. It exists on several platforms. So this is another way I define excessive. It's not just in person, but it is online and several different online platforms. Excessive bullying can be defined also by you're not being bullied for one thing, but several different parts of you. So it's your looks, and it's how poor you are, and it's who you're dating, and what kind of clothes you wear, and blah, 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 blah. It's all of these different kinds of things. So think of something that you can add an exponent to. It's, bullying squared, and you're getting to the idea of what I mean by excessive. Here, again, are some of the things that the ways that cyberbullying affects our kids. So decreased self-esteem. They don't feel like they're able to do things. And you might think that, oh, poor kid, their self-esteem is bad, whatever. But what I mean by that is they don't think they're able to do things like schoolwork. They don't think they're able to make friends. They don't think that they're able to try out for sports. They don't think that they're able to try extra projects and learn things. They don't think that they're able to be loved. That's what I mean by decreased self-esteem. It's horrible. Increased depression. They feel sad. They feel unable to have the desire to want to achieve things. They can have suicidal thoughts. Increased in-person bullying. So cyberbullying, as horrible as it is, if you're getting a kid who is able to have some boundaries, a kid can turn off his device and go do something else, right? But excessive cyberbullying also leads to increased in-person bullying, and that creates its own physical issues. Excessive bullying can lead to truancy, where they're not going to school, or they're very late to school, or they leave school early, or they're skipping classes, or any of those kinds of issues. It can lead to increased physical health issues. Bullying can affect a kid's physical health. So the amount of stress that a kid is under can make a kid have headaches. It can make them nauseous. It can decrease the functioning of their immune system, where they're literally getting sick with everything that comes by. It can cause joint problems. It can, on down the list, anything that you would normally associate with increased stress as a physical health issue, a kid can get from this, and a lot of the things you wouldn't necessarily think about too. Increased substance abuse. If a kid feels othered long enough, they do things on purpose to change the way they feel. So if a kid feels shitty because of esteem and depression and bullying and all these other things, they're not passing their classes, and they have no amount of value on themselves, that feels like crap. And so they start to do things on purpose to make themselves feel different, even if it's just for a little while. And substance abuse is on the list of those things. And of course, decreased grades is a thing on the list, where because of bullying, their mind is somewhere else. How do I protect myself? How do I save face? How do I get away from a bully? And it's not on their schoolwork, or literally sometimes even attending class. Bullied kids are more at risk for the following. So again, if I'm asking the question, why is being bullied such a big deal? Excessive bullying makes kids more at risk for these things. Sex offenders prey on kids with low self-esteem. We never want to think about this, and I hope it never happens to anybody at all, especially the kids that we know. But the reality is, sex offenders know who to look for. And they look for vulnerable kids. They look for kids who don't have friends or don't have people that protect them. And they look for kids who are bullied. Isolated and depressed kids are at greater risk of suicide. September is Suicide Awareness Month, and we've been talking about suicide a fair amount at Jefferson Center and in mental health places around the country. Isolated and depressed kids who are bullied excessively, are at greater risk of suicide. Scared kids with low self-esteem are more likely to drop out of school, commit a crime, get pregnant, get an STD, engage in drug trafficking, and other things. So to answer the question, why are we talking about bullying and why is it a big deal? There are a lot of reasons, and here are some of them. Being bullied can be a horrible and dangerous condition. I want to talk about for a second, what is Colorado law about bullying? And I want to draw attention to two things on this slide. One of them is just what it says. Colorado statute forbids cyberbullying, period. It specifically rejects bullying based on all of these factors: disability, race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, religion, ancestry, and special education status. So for the most part, any of the things that make a kid feel othered are on this list, and it's against the law to cyberbully against these things. Having said that, what I want to highlight about this slide is Colorado law does forbid cyberbullying, but the law is not in criminal law. It is an education law. So it is the Colorado Department of Education that has a statute forbidding cyberbullying. Why is that important and why is it there? If somebody were a bully in a school and they bullied another kid in a cyberbullying way, it is illegal, but the consequence, because it's not in criminal court, the consequence is not a criminal proceeding. It is an educational proceeding. And so whatever a principal can dish out, that is the consequence for cyberbullying. Those things can be detention, those things can be suspension, those things can be expulsion, and very often there's a growing amount of the tool used as restorative justice. So what that means is that there's a process in the school where an assistant principal or a school counselor or a teacher or the principal or somebody, multiple people, take the bully and take the victim, get them to talk to each other, and they have projects where they interact with each other on purpose in a guided way, where they start to, believe it or not, get along, see each other as people, and learn better skills to manage whatever feeling that both of them are having. I am going to focus a little bit on the victims of bullying. However, bullies also have their own problems, and helping bullies and victims of bullying work together is a really often great, it's laughed at sometimes when people don't know what it is, but it's a really great method of solving the problem. It's really difficult for some kids to cyberbully or bully a kid that they've just, done a project with, or really talked to, or had some sort of collaboration in a volunteer project together. It sounds odd, but I've seen this process work wonders, and a lot of schools are jumping on this process. Here are ways that we can prevent cyberbullying. We want to encourage our kids to tell us about bullying. I say this with at least one grain of salt, right? Because when I started this conversation a little bit ago, I absolutely said some bullying is normal. I'm not going to call it like positive, but the consequences of bullying can be positive insofar that kids can learn tolerance, they can learn patience. The victims of bullying can learn really great skills that they can carry forward later in life, where we learn that everything isn't going to go our way and that some people are jerks. And that's just how it is, right? Unfortunately, we want our kids to learn that because it really is a valuable thing that they can learn later in life. So while I wouldn't encourage a kid to come up and tell you every bad thing that Joey from school said, I do think that it's important to teach our kids when bullying is excessive, And maybe before it's excessive, like they can say, hey, mom and dad, what do you think about this? And they can talk about it. We do want to have kids learn self-independence with these things as they can, but we also want kids to know that we're on their side and we should protect them when things get out of hand. So encourage our kids to tell you about bullying that is happening to them or even to a friend, or maybe especially a sibling or something like that. Know your kids' sites and apps. So this is where I'm going to start talking about media and technology and devices. To some real extent, I'm not going to say anything you don't know, but I might be encouraging you to do some things that you're not doing. For example, know your kids' sites and apps. You should know how your kids' devices work. You should know their passwords. You should know what apps they use. You should be giving permission to kids about what apps and sites they can use and which ones they cannot be on. You should be going through their phones and finding out what they're doing. You can look at their media kind of report and their scroll down drop boxes and all that kind of stuff and see what they're looking at. Your kids will hate this. And I don't see it as being particularly different than your parents. Like when we were kids, they totally spied on us and they absolutely told us which friends we could hang out with and which ones we could not hang out with. They totally micromanaged who we could have a date with. They totally told us which groups of kids we could spend time with, how late we could hang out with them. And so the rules that we were taught when we were kids carry over in theme to how we can parent on our kids' devices. And it's not that different in terms of what kinds of rules are there and how we should maintain those rules, right? To some extent, it is very different. None of us as parents grew up with a cell phone in our pocket. We didn't grow up that way. We didn't grow up with the idea that we could call somebody across the world and FaceTime them. We didn't grow up with the idea that we could Google something and find out anything that we wanted to know. We didn't grow up with porn in our pockets. We didn't, all these things that having a phone in your pocket lets you do. We didn't grow up that way. And so on a very real level, we're making up the rules as we go along. Having said that, I really do think it's a comforting kind of thought process that we can use the same themes and rules that we had when we were kids and apply them on technology for our own kids, if that kind of makes sense. So know who your kids are talking to and tell them who they can't talk to. Tell them where they can and cannot go. Tell them what times of day they can go there and what time is too late. All these kind of rules that we did grow up with, we can apply on social media with our own kids. We can have parental controls, right? So on various devices and platforms, we can have different kinds of controls on what our kids can access and what they cannot access. We can, depending on who your Wi-Fi provider is at home, you can unplug it for your kids and keep it on your device or whatever. And so sometimes those kinds of controls can be really helpful. Friend and follow your kids on social media and ask trusted adults to do the same. A kid is much less likely to be bullied if there's an adult who can see you bullying them, right? Who can see that. I think I said that wrong, and you know what I mean. It's totally what I'm going to say. A kid is much less likely to bully if there's an adult watching them do the bullying. Cyberbullying prevention rules and boundaries, and I'm going to continue this. Parents decide what sites are okay for kids, period. How do you decide this? And I think it's age appropriate. We want our kids to be able to make just enough mistakes that they can handle it and learn from it, right? We don't want kids to make so many mistakes that they're drowning or getting excessively harmed. But I do think that, when we think of our parents letting us do things for the first time, I think our parents expected us to not be perfect. They expected us to make some mistakes, but they were also very cautious about what kinds of harm could come to us. And they weighed that out. And I think the same guiding rules apply to cyberbullying and what kind of access kids can have to media. So parents decide what sites are okay for kids, period. Our kids aren't going to like that. And guess what? Kids don't like a lot of rules that they have. So that is fine. Believe it or not, kids need rules and they like rules. They function well with rules. And even though they're going to complain about some of the rules that they have in the moment, we know as parents what is good for our kids. Parents teach kids to be socially careful, right? So we wanted to tell our kids that they should not post anything online that they don't want somebody else to know to make fun of them over. If the value over somebody that they don't want knowing something is so powerful that they're going to be hurt by it, they shouldn't post it. So in the same way that we tell kids to not talk about something embarrassing to somebody in public, we want to communicate to them that social media is public, and that they shouldn't be communicating things that we don't want, that they would regret. Privacy settings are important. So we want to tell our kids what privacy is. We want to tell them what these settings are and how they work. We should be aware of our kids setting their own privacy settings, and we should be setting the rules about what those privacy settings should be. We don't want kids to be exposing all of their secrets to the known world. It is okay to block inappropriate users. So if a kid is running into problems where they keep having the same person do or say inappropriate things, block them and have your kids know that it's okay for them to say no, and to block them in turn. Keep your passwords safe. You should know all of the passwords to your kids' devices and apps. And there are apps that you can use for that. You can keep them all in a notebook if you want to. Most people use some sort of app for that, it seems like. Ask schools about bullying policies. Jefferson, Jeffco School District has their own rules, and it seems like they vary, perhaps not in policy, but in practice is totally what I would say, from school to school a little bit. So you're going to want to, if your kids are prone to being bullied, or if you're just curious and want to be proactive, call your school and ask them about bullying policies and what you and the school can do to keep them safe. Here are some things kids should do to keep themselves safe. Kids should not respond to being cyberbullied. If it is excessive, they should tell an adult. They should immediately go do, tell somebody, whether that person is a teacher, a counselor, a parent, or whoever it is. If you, depending on your kid and what's appropriate, right, have your kid take a screenshot of the bullying that occurred. What this does is, because a lot of bullies are savvy, and I said earlier that a lot of messages can stay, some kids bully really well secretly, and so they'll send a kid who they can see across the classroom, across the dining hall, whatever. They'll send a kid a horrible bullying message on like Snapchat or something and immediately delete it. And Snapchat, the messages kind of go away very quickly anyway. So have the kid take a screenshot and then there's proof. Because otherwise, sometimes the bully can get away with, I didn't do anything, I don't know what they're talking about. And we know that's a lie, but we can't prove it. Always encourage your kids to block bullies on social media, or to never friend them to begin with. If the privacy settings on a lot of apps and settings are such that you can only get messages from your friends, the bully isn't going to be able to get in there anyway. But some, apps are public, and so block the bully if that's what's happening. The kid should report threats and law violations to law enforcement. So after the kid tells an adult, a teacher or a counselor can guide them to law enforcement, hopefully with your own guidance. And here are the things that should absolutely be reported to law enforcement. Pornographic images, an image of a kid in a private situation. So like if a kid is taking compromising pictures of your kid in the locker room or whatever. Stalking. If somebody's not leaving your kid alone and they're following them all over, and you know what stalking is, that should go to the police. Hate crimes, or other kinds of violence or threats of violence, any of those things should be sent right to the police. I'm going to take a moment here and just pause before I move on to body image. Are there any questions or comments about bullying and cyberbullying?
We have no questions at this point, Joel.
Alrighty.
But I would encourage people to add them as we go in that Q&A tab on the right-hand side.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to move on to body. If we have more questions, you can ask them as we go, and that's fine too. Why am I talking about body image? It's also an issue that can affect the same things that I mentioned earlier. So I'll talk about the why in a little bit. But body image and social media are very related. Body image issues can range from general dissatisfaction with your body to an obsessive, all-consuming thoughts about your body. It's always based on comparison to other people. This has always been an issue for teenagers and kids. They grow up, their bodies are changing, puberty happens, kids' parts grow at different rates. Some people come in all sizes, and kids grow up in the same way, they're different sizes. And so it's always been very normal for kids to look at their own bodies and wonder, am I okay? Do I look okay? Should I do something different? Will people like me based on how I look? All of those kinds of things are thoughts that kids have and should have. It's actually kind of normal and healthy. What makes social media, it just adds a little fuel to the fire, and it can become quite an issue. When you look at social media, people take pictures of themselves, and a lot of people can, especially if they're like the popular social media influencers or whatever, the people who have thousands and millions of people following them, they can take hours with a selfie. And they look beautiful. They're beautiful to begin with. And then they do the light, and they do the makeup, and they do the situation, and they do the whole thing. And it can take hours for a selfie, and then they look perfect. And then your kid can think that they have to look just like them. So I want to talk about that idea. Who is affected by body image issues? 80% of women in a recent study don't like their bodies, which is horrible. And 34% of men report the same. I tend to think that a lot of men are lying, and they're not as happy with their bodies as they would like to believe either. I do think that media targets women, and when there's a racist quality, or not racist, but a sexist issue in our media system that, of course, portrays women very differently than men are portrayed. And it does have to do with the sex divide in that number. Teens are at most risk, according to most studies, but no age group is immune. Singles are at greater risk than coupled folks. So when we're talking about who is at most risk to look at their body and hate how they look and have mental health issues related to how they are dissatisfied because of how they look, again, teens at the most risk, single teens more than coupled teens, and female uncoupled teens are the most at risk. Folks already struggling with other issues, if they're already depressed, if they're already isolated, and hey, they're COVID, right? I think that is social media and the role that it plays on how people think about their bodies has been weirdly exacerbated by the effect of not spending as much time with people as maybe we used to. Loneliness, rigid rules, all that kind of stuff. Why am I talking about body image? Again, here are some of the things that can happen. Poor self-esteem. And again, I'm not talking about, oh, I don't think I can play basketball very well. It's poor self-esteem means you don't think you are worthy of good things happening to you. So you're not worthy of success in school. You're not worthy to try hard to make your success happen for yourself. It's a really damaging kind of condition. Depression and suicidal thoughts, eating disorders can lead to all kinds of health issues, including death when it's very severe. Substance abuse, again, when people are not satisfied with their own body and they feel like they're othered and not worthy of good things happening to them. They want to change how they feel, even for a short while, and substance abuse is one of the things that can help them do that. Body image problems can lead to lower grades, decreased social engagement. They just don't make friends and they don't feel comfortable being around people. And of course, they have increased social anxiety. Here are some fun social media facts. This study is about 4 years old, I think. Florida State University study examined women who looked at Facebook for 20 minutes, just 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes time, women reported greater dissatisfaction with their bodies at the end of those 20 minutes than they did at the beginning. It's remarkable, right? 20 minutes, women look at Facebook and they feel worse about themselves. The average kid media time per day is 7.5 hours. That is excluding time on a computer for school. 7.5 hours with a TV or a computer for fun or social media or a phone. For each hour of Facebook time, a teenager is more likely to develop anorexia and or bulimia. And here's the kicker, except when parents are involved with their kids on Facebook. If you need more encouragement to friend your kids on social media, that would be an example of the kind of encouragement that I would like you all to have. In 2015, the average adult female was 5'4" and 144 pounds. The average model in America is 5'10" and 110 pounds. So if you can imagine what most women look like versus what they're looking at on social media and what the disparity is and how that makes women feel, it's all wrapped up in that fourth bullet. How to intervene with our kids and promote positive body image. We want to encourage the basics. So, and this means, by the way, modeling these things, right? Which is really difficult. But we do want to encourage healthy habits. So eat healthy things, at least usually, sleep enough, exercise enough, the basics, right? If we can model these things for our kids are a lot more likely to do it themselves, rather than us telling them to do something and then us doing something wildly different, right? We know that that style of parenting is not very effective with too many things, and it is also true with body image. So we want to help them and model for them getting healthy stuff, enough healthy food, enough sleep, and enough exercise. We want to encourage team sports. This encourages young people to compare their bodies, because they should compare their bodies to other kids. They should be like, oh, I'm shorter. Oh, I'm taller. Oh, I'm heavier. I'm more muscular. Oh, my boobs are a little bigger. Oh, I'm whatever it is, right? All of those kinds of comparisons are how kids can kind of look at their bodies and own their bodies, and figure out a sense of identity that their body can help them have. It also fosters mutual acceptance of other people's bodies. So rather than kids doing things like, oh, look at the short kid or whatever, and then the short kid gets bullied, we know that the short kid can be good at his role on a team sport, whatever that sport is. I think if we can think back to PE or whatever sports we played or didn't play, we could envision other kids, maybe we were the odd-bodied person or whatever, having some success in team sports and what that did for us and our own kind of sense of mental health wellness. You know what I'm saying? Third bullet on here, we want to encourage pro-social activities and friendships in whatever venue that is. So say your kid's not an athlete, that's okay. Pro-social activities when there's not a pandemic, Include whatever extracurricular thing there is. It might be music stuff, it might be theater stuff, it might be chess club, it might be like whatever it is. It might be volunteering, it might be swim lessons at the YMCA, like whatever it is. Have your kids do something that is pro-social with other kids and other adults. And that process helps kids feel good about the thing that they are doing, feel good about their own bodies helping other kids do a good thing. It also encourages kids to mix up themselves with other people who look a little bit different. It encourages body positivity, and it decreases the sense of social anxiety that can come from a displaced sense of body positivity. Fourth one on here, we want to encourage kids to do what they're good at. Self-efficacy produces self-esteem. Self-esteem is a sense of worthiness in your own person. Like, am I worthy to be happy? Am I worthy to be doing this thing? Am I worthy to have success? Like, whatever it is. Self-efficacy is the amount of confidence you have in performing a task. So confidence produces worthiness is really what a lot of research shows. So if you have a kid who's a horrible athlete but really good at theater, have them do theater. If you have a kid who's horrible at everything except caring for turtles, definitely have them care for turtles, and that'll help them produce self-esteem. They're worthy of having happiness because they're good at something. Encourage your kids to find out what they're good at and to share what they're good at with other people. Number two, how to intervene, 2 branches of psychoeducation that are super useful. We want our kids to know that the beauty that they have been spending all of this time looking at social media is fake, right? Loads of time, effort, and fake methods go into the appearance of beauty and modeling. There's, for ladies, there is a ton of makeup. For men too, truthfully. It's fake hair and makeup. It's all of this time that goes into them glamming up. And even after that, a lot of magazines and social media magazines airbrush, they alter the pictures, they digitally fake things to make people even prettier than they even were after all of the hair and makeup stuff. So we want our kids to know that people don't naturally look like how the pictures are portraying people to look. The second thing on here is that genetics happen and biology happens. Not everybody looks and weighs the same, right? So what a normal person looks like, weighs, goes through during puberty and pregnancy. All of these things happen to people's bodies that make them look a little different from week to week, especially when kids are in puberty and growing up. Even the muscle athletes who have their abs chiseled out, dehydrate themselves for a few days before they take pictures just so their abs can stand out. They don't look like that all the time. And it's something good for our kids who are obsessed with those pictures to know. I want to leave this topic with this kind of thought.
I just want to interrupt you real quick. We did have a question come in.
Okay.
And the timing might be perfect with those interventions because the pandemic has really put a damper on some of those positive social activities. So I'm wondering if you can address that. And the question that came in in the chat was regarding cell phones. And do we accept that cell phones are the new form of socializing safely during a pandemic? And what can go into deciding if or when a student gets a cell phone?
Okay, let me answer some of those questions. First up, the question was around social activities during a pandemic, because a lot of the activities that I just mentioned are not offered in the same way that they were before the pandemic. So it takes a lot of creativity right now, and a lot of that creativity is online. which on some level increases somebody's vulnerability to cyberbullying if that was happening. But on another level, because a lot of parents are more engaged with their kids online right now, sometimes there's even less opportunity for cyberbullying too. I don't want to paint the picture that the internet is evil and that electronic devices are evil. I think on some level, we have to have them right now to stay connected and to stay engaged. Some activities that people are doing to stay connected. There are still some physical activities that people are doing outside. Like I can drive down any park in Denver and I see kids having some sort of organized athletic kind of thing happening, and those are still happening through the pandemic. I'm not condoning them or saying that is everything that needs, every family doesn't need to be for that, and there is some caution that should be had. I do see it happening though, and I want to say that out loud. There can be distant athletic activities outside. People can still run, people can still walk, and they can still be distanced from each other. Those things can still happen. There can be the concept of a bubble is something that is being put out there in terms of having kids still maintain positive friendships. So choose your kids' friends, not everybody at school, not everybody maybe even that your kid wants to hang out with, but choose a couple, and these are your friends for a while, and these are who you get to hang out with. That takes some communication with parents, and that takes some communication with your parents' friends, truthfully, because you want to know who your friends are all hanging out with. But something like that is an option, and it does minimize the number of people that your kids are hanging out with. I don't think on some level for an extended period of time, like months and months and months and months, like what's been happening, that having nobody to hang out with or do things with is mentally healthy. That's my own opinion. I'm not representing Jefferson Center with that opinion, but it's totally what I think. So creating some structure where you have a bubble for your kids to hang out with, and you're choosing kind of who they can hang out with is fine. So among those activities that we can do, I think we can do some of the activities that our kids were doing before, and we can also have activities that just involve less people, that accommodate your kids' interest. You know your kids is really what I'm saying. Allow your kids safely to be creative and accommodate their own interests. Is a cell phone the best device to maintain social contact these days? I'm going to say two things about that, and I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second. In lieu of hanging out with nobody, I think a cell phone or some other electronic device is a must to stay in touch with people. Having said that, it is not a replacement for person-to-person contact over the grand scheme of time. I don't think it's healthy to have only cell phone contact or electronic contact with people and no physical contact over months and months and months. I don't think that's healthy. So as a bridge to fill in the gaps, I think electronic devices are healthy. If it's the only thing that you're getting over months, I don't think that's healthy. If that answer makes sense. I think I answered the question, right? I'm just going to say that I did.
There was another element. You did answer the question, but one additional element to that was, how can you tell if or when your child may be ready for a cell phone?
Oh, there you go. It's a little tricky, right? So I have seen a lot of parents move in this direction, and I think it's a great idea. For example, if your kid is just at that age where they need a little bit of independence, you don't really trust them to make good choices because they're just not old enough yet. But you want them to be able to call you or text you when they need a ride or when they're done with something. Get them a cheapo flip phone that doesn't have internet on it, right? So all they can do is call and text, but they can't get on an app and they're not downloading anything, and they're not going to get into too much trouble with it. If you want to, you can limit their texting so that they're not on it all the time. And you can do things like that. It teaches your kids limits. They have a little bit more freedom because they can contact you. You can give them a little bit more freedom because you can contact them. And they're also with a reasonably inexpensive device that you can give to them, and it's not going to cost a fortune when they lose it or break it. So as an intermediate step, I think the cheapo flip phone is a great thing for younger children. There's not a magic age where kids are suddenly old enough to have a cell phone. Kids mature at different rates. I tend to think girls are usually ready for a cell phone a little bit before boys, but that's not always true. I think just in general, girls are better at having boundaries and a little bit more responsibility with things before boys are. Boys are more impulsive all the way through childhood. I'm wildly generalizing. So maybe that's a hard conversation to have with girls and boys if they're siblings. Well, I was 5 years, like whatever age that they were, and then your children are going to have an argument. My other realm of advice is you know your kids and you know when they're kind of ready or not, and just trust your gut with that. It can be useful to talk to your children's friends' parents and say, how did you make this choice? How did you wrap your head around this? Because no matter what I say, right, you trust the people in your lives and their opinions matter. Talk to your own siblings if you have older siblings or cousins. How did you make these choices? And kind of take a consensus and see what resonates with you, see what makes sense, because you're going to get some good feedback, I promise. The other thing that I would totally say that you would do is talk to your kid and ask them, how do you know when you're ready for a cell phone? What can you do to prove it to me? And your kids are probably going to give you some really good feedback. When I've done this conversation with kids and parents, I've had kids say things like, well, when I can get my grades up, which on the surface has nothing to do with the cell phone conversation, but then they're doing the thing that says, I have earned this and I'm really ready to have some responsibility with a thing that you're going to give me. And I'm willing to keep this responsibility by doing X, which is really kind of the heart of the conversation, right? That they're going to get another privilege in turn for being a little bit more responsible. So those kinds of conversations are worthwhile. Ask your kid, how do I know you're going to be ready? How can you prove to me that you're ready for a little bit more responsibility? And those are good conversations to have with kids. Sound good? Okay. I wanted to talk about this idea that the internet ain't all bad, right? So there are some websites on here that promote positive body image, and I'll just kind of let you look at those. The slide's been up for a little while anyway. I wanted to talk about suicide on social media for a little bit. I hear from a lot of people that they think that suicide is bad and creates suicidal thoughts in some people. And I've also heard the opposite, that some people think that the internet is very healthy. For the most part, I'm going to say that it's healthy in moderation, but I want to break that down for you. Does the web increase suicide? Some sites have been shown to increase suicide rates. Some sites and chat rooms are supportive of suicide. That's allowed to happen for some reason. It increased screen time likely increases depression in young people. So there's not a magic amount, but they absolutely have shown in several studies that the more people look at their screens, the more depressed they're likely to be. So at some point, we just have to unplug and look at real people around us to manage our depression. Does the web decrease suicide? This is the flip side of the conversation. Some sites have been shown to decrease suicide rates. Some sites have supportive chat rooms. Some sites actively intervene against suicide. How do we monitor this with our kids? You just have to be involved and look over their shoulder and look at what they're watching. Colorado, I'm not going to go through all of these suicide stats for Colorado. There's more on here than I ever really wanted to give people. But just in general, I think it's healthy for people in Colorado to know a few things. Always, I've lived in Colorado for about 21 years or something like that. And as long as I've lived here, as long as I've been a counselor, Colorado is at the top of the list of states in terms of our suicide rate per capita. We're always toward the top 5. Why is that? We don't know. There have been thoughts about it being related to elevation, which tends not to make sense because there are other high places in the world that don't have our suicide rate. And there have been some other theories that float about. What makes the most sense to me about maybe why this is that Colorado seems to have been a transient state. People move here from somewhere else and they leave all of their friends and family and trusted loved ones behind. And they get here, they don't know anybody, they struggle a little bit, and they don't have anybody to lean on in the same way that they might have if they were home where they came from. And so a displaced person with fewer social supports is exactly the kind of person who could be overwhelmed by something and then have suicidal thoughts and then pursue those suicidal thoughts. So that's the theory that resonates with me, and I think it probably makes sense to most people. Suicide is a leading cause of injury death in Colorado. In kids under the age of 21, it depends on the year that we're looking at, but over the last 10 years, in 6 or 7 of those years, suicide was the leading cause of death for kids under the age of 21 in Colorado. Colorado is consistently ranked toward the top, which is what I just said. Colorado suicide rates have exceeded the national average by almost 40% since suicide data was first collected in 1910. We've always been right at the top. I'm not, like I said, I don't want to read all of these things. I do want to highlight this set of statistics for LGBTQ youth. If you are the parent of a kid who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or questioning, or non-binary, the rate of suicide attempts is 4 times greater for LGBTQ youth and 2 times greater for questioning youth than that of a heterosexual kid or a cisgender kid. If you know your kid is in this population, or even if you think he or she might be aware and talk to your kid about suicide sometimes. You're not going to make them more likely to kill themselves or to try to kill themselves by asking. In fact, I believe the opposite. I think that, and research shows, is what I should say, that kids who are talked to by their parents about suicide and given permission to talk about suicide are much less likely to try to kill themselves if they feel like they have a parent who will talk to them about this. It's a great, healthy thing. The next bullet on here is even more concerning. In a national study, 40% of trans adults reported having made a suicide attempt. Those are adults over the age of 25. 92% of these individuals reported having attempted suicide before the age of 25. So under 25 is the risky time. 40% of an entire group of people, trans adults, reported having made a suicide attempt. That's a lot of people. What to look for if you're concerned that your kid or someone else you know, truthfully, is suicidal. Here are some of the things to look for. They're feeling depressed, hopeless, feeling helpless. They've had a previous suicide attempt. They've had a loss of interest in activities. They have slipping grades or work. They're feeling angry or irritable. They have an unexplained mood improvement if they've been sad and anxious for a long time and all of a sudden they're having a really good day. It sounds like it's a shitty thing to not trust that, but it's one of the things to look for. Change in appetite, sleeping, difficulty concentrating, feelings of isolation, withdrawal, history of depression, sadness, crying, low energy, lack of support. If you are looking for help for helping your kid or someone you know or yourself with suicidal thoughts, here are some resources for you. I think this slideshow is going to be posted on Jefferson Center's website. Is that right, Amy? I think it will.
Yes. And
Okay.
I also happen to know that these resources are posted on our jcmh.org site already.
That is true.
Regardless of the slides.
That is true. So if you're looking for these kinds of supports, you can contact Jefferson Center ourselves, and we're happy to help in an emergency. There are some numbers toward the top where you can help. I'm shifting gears really quick. I want to talk about screen time for your kids and how much is okay. So I have two guiding things. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics, who put this out last year. For kids who are 5 and under, they're pretty sure that these amounts are pretty healthy for kids. And then there was no agreement at all among professionals for kids 6 and up. So I'm going to talk about that idea for a second. For up to 18 months, pediatricians are saying no screen time at all is healthy for kids. Is that realistic, is what Joel Smith will say. And I'm going to say not always. I think sometimes having a device on that makes sound is really great to soothe your kids and occupy them while you take a nap. And I think that is just necessary sometimes. Having said that, I do want to report what the AAP says. Under 18 months, they say kids should not have screen time. For a kid who is 2 to 5 years old, they say 1 hour per day is okay, and more than that starts to be unhealthy. And again, for kids who are 6 and up, there's no professional agreement. They say know your kids, know their limits, know what makes them squirrely, know what makes them unhealthy, and then make a decision that is best suited for your own kid. For healthy kids, this is again, according to the AAP, for healthy kids, an average day includes school, homework time, at least 1 hour of physical activity, social contact, and sleep, which is anywhere from 8 to 12 hours for most kids. Whatever is left over can be screen time. Here are some signs that your kid is getting too much screen time. There are some obvious ones on here. If your kids have sore hands because they're holding their cell phone or they're holding their controller, or if they're doing whatever it is they do, that's a sign that it's too much. If your kids have headaches because they're staring at a screen, too much. If your kids have anxiety when you remove them from their device, too much. When your kids are dreaming about social media or games on a regular basis, everybody has random dreams, right? But if they're doing this all the time, too much. Would rather hang out with electronic friends than actual friends, and they're doing that on a regular basis, too much. And here's where I have questions. So we've kind of reached the end of what I prepared. I did want to talk to you a little bit about online schooling, and I just wanted to say a few words. I have a lot of teacher friends, and what I did this week was invite on social media my teacher friends to say, if you could communicate one thing to parents about what would make their online school experience better for your kid, what would you say? And I had teachers run the gamut with all kinds of different suggestions. A very common suggestion that I received from my teacher friends was have, when possible, when there's an interface between the student and the teacher, such that you can both look at each other on camera, have your kid turn your camera on, was a very common bit of feedback from teachers. Teachers are saying that kids often turn their camera off, and then there's no eye contact, and there's no dialogue, there's no involvement. It really helps teachers to know who's there, if they're paying attention, if they're following along, or even just to remember who the kid is, because the school year has just started, and teachers are greatly helped by just putting a face to a name, is a lot of feedback that I got. So have your kids turn your cameras on. Another piece of feedback was to be invasive a little bit with the emails that you get between teachers and students and parents, because teachers send some emails and some communication to students and not all of them make into parents. So log into your kids' emails and make sure that they're doing everything that they need to be doing. Speaking out of the other side of the mouth, teachers also said, don't be helicopter parents and let your kids make mistakes. Let your kids get behind, if that means, because there's a lesson to be learned in that. They literally said both things, and I'm just passing it on. But I think the overriding message is know your kids, be invasive, make decisions that support who your kids are, is kind of the overriding message that I think parents wanted you to know. Right now, I'm going to open up for questions and comments. We have a few minutes before the end of this time.
And we did have a few more questions come in.
Yeah.
Do you know of any good crash courses or groups for parents to learn about the newest apps, to stay up to date on things and what they should be looking out for?
I don't know of a crash course. It looks like Shaviv. I don't know if I said your name right. I hope I did. What is very fun to do, though, make Google your friend. So sometimes when I'm preparing for this, and I'll just tell you what I do rather than answering your question for you, I'll give you the process that I learn with. Google kids' favorite apps 2020, and just look at them all. And you can kind of know what the in thing is. Go to your app store and look at favorite apps for kids. And you can look at the top 10 downloaded apps. Depending on what app store you use, it'll break it down by age. And you can look at what your kids or what your kids' friends probably are downloading a lot of. May Google your friend. You can also Google the topic based on the app. Risk or danger for kids or something like that. And you can find things that either the app developer or other parents have discovered, and there will be a list of comments. You can also Google app reviews by parents, and you can find all kinds of good concerns from there. I don't know. I don't know the crash course, but those are good self-education tools that you can use, and that sometimes I use when I'm preparing myself for these.
Would you use a similar process for another question that came in on how do we know which apps or games are appropriate for kids?
Good question too. Kind of similarly, if you go to the App Store, if they're games, especially for kids, and often if they're just apps in general, Apple does this. There's a suggested age range, kind of like you would, go to the, if you go to Target and get a board game, it says suggested age range 6 to 10 or whatever it is. And there's an age range for the apps also. And you can kind of see a little bit about that. Of course, our kids are different and they always don't fit in very neatly to those age ranges. I know that I didn't when I was a kid, and I'm assuming that our kids are kind of the same way. But it'll give you an idea to look at the age range and what the suggested age is on the app by the app developer. And you can also kind of Google the same things and look at parent reviews for those kinds of things. Yep.
So
it looks like go ahead.
A bit of a different topic, but we had another question come in. How can we ensure that friending and following our kids on social media won't give bullies ammo to bully them about having overprotective parents?
I absolutely land on the side of what the research says on this. So I know that kids can be bullied for having parents be too involved, right? Ask yourself if you're being too involved and trust your judgment. I I I know that that's a thing and it happens sometimes. Having said that, I've been a child therapist for about 20 years, and I don't think I can. I'm being serious. I don't think I can think of a time when a kid told me my parent is too involved with me. They do tell me that their parents don't pay them any attention. They do tell me that their parents neglect them. They do tell, you know what I'm saying? I think at the end of a kid's life, a kid isn't going to be like, my parents spent too much time with me on Facebook. You know, I don't think they're going to say that. Kids say all kinds of mean things for a variety of reasons, and if there isn't a reason, the kid's going to make one up. So I wouldn't encourage you to be too focused on spending your time monitoring your kids' activity on Facebook, or whatever the app is, because I just all of the literature says otherwise, that you're going to be protecting your kid if you're involved in their social media and not antagonizing bullies. If your involvement in your kid's life provokes a bully to bully your kid, you should take that as proof that you need to protect your kid and not as evidence that you shouldn't be involved with your kid.
Thanks. Another question we had come in, and I think these questions are great. For kids who are older and practically live on their cell phones, how can parents realistically monitor what they're doing on that phone?
My own advice is that kids shouldn't be living on their cell phones. So I know that that's easier said than done, and I get it. I get it. But having said that, that's the reality. And as adults, we shouldn't be living on our cell phones either. We need to model for our kids what healthy behavior is. So everything that I just said for the amount of time that kids should be spending on their cell phones is true for adults also. So I just broke down what school and studying and sleep and eating and exercise, and then there's just a couple of hours left that can be screen time. That's true for adults also. We go to work, we spend X amount of time getting our kids up, we spend time picking our kids up from school or homeschooling them while we're not taking them to school, whatever the reality is of your household. And we spend time making meals, and we spend time exercising maybe, or we spend time doing these other things. At the end of the day, if your Apple screen share app tells you you've been on your phone for 7 hours, that's too long for adults too. And so we need to make sure about how much time that we're spending on our own devices so that we can model that for kids. And then on purpose, have activities that don't involve technology, or at least don't involve our phones, so that we can have some amount of contact with our kids, so that our kids are learning good habits without their cell phones. That's one of the best ways to make that habit happen. If your kids are super addicted and you can't wrest the device out of their cold, dead hands, right? Turn off the Wi-Fi, do whatever you need to do, but they shouldn't be living on their phones.
All right. Well, that addressed all the questions in our chat, and we're getting close to time. So I would like to thank you again, Joel, and thank you to everyone for attending today. I am posting right now a link in our chat box to an evaluation survey. Please fill this out. It does help us improve these conferences going forward. And there's always room for improvement. So, and also make sure to stop by our expo hall that's here at the virtual conference to learn more and connect with all of our community partners. And also, no matter what you're facing in life, it's important to have the tools and resources that you and your family need to thrive. Jefferson Center is here for you. In addition to the resources that Joel shared, we're open, we're accepting new clients, and accessing care is easier than ever with our virtual appointments. You can visit our website at jcmh.org, follow us on Facebook for resources, and you can also reach out to us by phone at 303-425-0300. So I thank you all once again and have a great night.
Thank you, Amy.
And Joel, if you could hit that stop broadcast, I think we are good to go.
Okay.